As mentioned, we've got a couple seats at the table. You're welcome to take those, and we can get started with that. So the first item that was there, and it's sort of, we're treating this kind of as a meeting between both groups. So let me know the best way to put the things that you wanted on there.
What happened to Kyle? There he is.
Oh, he's coming in. Just with respect to the points that you wanted to make, I know we have a representative from Markham coming. Hi.
Here he is.
We're just getting started.
Hi, sorry.
Okay.
This is Kyle Connors. He's from Markham. He is from the audit firm. He was the main person on our audit, along with Christine. How do you say Christine's last name?
Coliff.
So welcome.
Thank you.
So the first item on the agenda for this part of the meeting is a discussion of the fiscal year 2019 financial statements. And I don't know if the best way to kick things off here. Were there specific questions regarding them that the audit committee had for us, or any members wanted to?
Well, I would just say, knowing we have a more detailed presentation scheduled for our business part, I would turn it over to talk more, process and other kinds of things involved, at least to start, and then see how it goes.
I'm just trying to think of the best way for questions, or did you folks have specific questions
Okay,
for us?
so sure, if you give us a second.
Absolutely.
My name is Jeff Wadovic. I'm chairman of the audit committee. I'm here with Richard August and Sarah Lee Norton.
Sarah Lee Norton.
There's three of the audit committee members. Two were unable to attend. It's Kurt Miller and Mark Bamford. And so we've asked, we're governed under an ordinance that came out in 2006. Dick happened to be helped write that ordinance. And we have not, the audit committee has, from my recollection, and I've served on this in the past, I'm back on it.
Yep.
We have never met with the school committee.
Right.
But, what we're trying to do is we're just trying to comply with the ordinance. And under section 2-402, under meetings, we're tasked, the audit committee, as it reads, the audit committee shall meet at least annually with each of the following: the town council, the school committee, the independent auditors, to discuss results of examinations or discuss any matters that the committee or any of these persons or firms believe should be discussed. So all we're trying to do
Is comply with the...
Comply with that,
And
okay.
I applaud you for it.
So that's, and the town council has been kind of easy, because in my past time on the committee, we've always sat at the town council meeting with the auditors and kind of went through the motions there. We've never formally sat with the school committee. In my prior time with it, we did have some issues at the school side prior to this administrative staff, and there were people from the school committee that came to our meetings all the time, but we never physically met our ordinance. So first of all, that's why we're here.
Sure.
Okay, so second thing is, regarding the audit this year, as everyone knows, we received what's called the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, which is a little more than just a normal audit. It provides 10 years worth of history in it. The town used to produce this document several years ago. In change of administrative staff at the town side, this report is very complicated and adds a lot of non-required information, at least for financial reporting. The town will get a certificate of excellence as a result of this document, and it's back on track of where we were maybe
5 years ago.
Yeah, I would say more like 7 years ago, something like that. So that's a good thing. Now the school department is part of this document. You guys have issued a separate set of financial statements which will allow a little more detail on the school department side, but the town received a clean opinion, and the school's a part of that, so that's awesome. The other thing is, we do have the uniform guidance report that came through, which the auditors had to complete, which represents the federal funds that come through the school, that federal funds that come through the town. And the federal funds, from what I can determine, that come through the town, approximately 54.8% are school related, the rest is town related. There were a couple findings, but none of them related to the school department, which is good. So the couple findings that are still in the document we've been able, from the town perspective and the school side, we've been able to dwindle down the issues. Now there are only 2 major ones that are remaining, and they're both town-related, nothing related to the school. So that's excellent as well.
Can I ask you again?
Sure.
So in relation to the uniform guidance, what we did is we selected a major program from the school, which was the special education program, and we reviewed that to make sure that you were in compliance with the federal guidelines, and we didn't note any non-compliance. So we tested programs on both the town and on the school side.
The uniform guidance is the old single audit,
Yep.
and it's really not financially driven, but it's compliance driven, compliance and internal control. So I'm just glad to see that there were no issues on the school side. For other matters for discussion, we just have a couple that we'd like to just, open up and just make sure that, and again, we're here strictly, we are we're an advisory board, we just have oversight, so we discuss internal controls and we kind of manage the financial reporting process on behalf of the town, and we report back to the town and we report back to you guys. So we just have a couple concerns as far as internal controls.
Does anybody on the committee have any questions for Kyle
Doesn't appear so at this time. No,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay.
Great.
So a couple concerns that we see is that we understand the new cash management process that's going through, and I understand myself why the school wants to manage their own cash account, and I have no problem with it, as long as there's reporting back and forth to make sure that the overall compliance with the town charter and custody of funds is handled, which I'm sure both solicitors have handled. So it hasn't really been fully implemented yet, is my understanding, so we're just concerned that we don't want to get into an issue where we have an internal control, at least from the auditor standpoint, going forward. So as an audit committee, that's one concern that is floating around our group. The second concern that we have is the change in the general ledger accounting package. Again, I think the committee doesn't have I'm speaking on behalf of the committee, but if my other committee members have an issue, please speak up. We don't have a problem with having the separate general ledger accounting package. We do have some concerns about the lack of the town having any ability to just have oversight, not to touch your records, not to change your records. Your records are your records. Once the appropriation comes over, you guys govern 100% of it. We don't have a problem with that. We're just concerned, as from our committee standpoint, that there could be a control issue from the standpoint of not fully understanding if and when there was a deficit and what the town's responsibility would be to fund that deficit.
So, just one quick thing, where you're jumping a little to number 3, which
Yeah.
I'm fine with. I'm just going in order, so we'll have to backtrack a little bit. One comment I'd like to make, just with respect to that, is there's a little history to how the transfer of the accounts and controls came about, which is that the school department was approached by the town asking the school department to take on this responsibility. It was a pretty heavy lift here at the school department to be able to do that. We on the school committee had some concerns about how that was going to be implemented and came up with, by working together, a memorandum of agreement that was just going to explain exactly how that transfer and the controls, just how all that was going to work, because it's a big change between the way things were done in the past and the way they're done now. So, after working with the town, working with the town finance director, a number of meetings with the town manager, Mr. Mollis, we were able to, work out the details of that. And it's almost completely implemented at this point. I mean, there's
I
some-
actually don't understand the comment that it's not completely
Yeah,
implemented. We've been reconciling our cash accounts since July. We took over July 1st. We transitioned to new accounts, so I'm not sure that I understand.
I
the
didn't say
comment.
that it wasn't implemented.
Oh, I thought you did.
No,
I thought you
no,
said it
I-
hadn't been
I-
fully implemented.
No, I'm
yet.
talking about the fact that the town cannot, the town, my understanding is that at some point in time in the future, the town will not be able to see your general ledger.
Okay, I
Sure.
think that's different than the cash thing. I
Right.
There are two
apologize. I
things.
thought I heard
No,
you say the
that-
cash
Just follow me
had
through.
not
I
been
have two,
possibly implemented.
I've moved to the second area where we have some concerns.
Great, so
Okay.
cash has been
So
fully
cash-
implemented.
cash-
We're clear on that.
No, but that's not what I was actually talking about,
Super.
so you're assuming something that I wasn't talking about. What,
Okay, I apologize for that. That's what I heard.
good. So what I actually think that you guys controlling your own cash account, performing the reconciliations, writing the checks, I think that's actually a fantastic thing. it takes a huge burden off the town. It allows the town to manage on other aspects. It puts some more controls in your place so that you can
Right.
actually understand what's happening and you can see it, and you don't have to wait for somebody else to report on it. I have no problem with that. That's me, and I believe the committee pretty much felt the same way. What we were concerned about is that what we've been reporting or been hearing is that the town, at some point, the town right now can see kind of what's going on because it's shared.
Right.
At some point in time, the town won't be able to see it, okay? And we, as a committee, just have a concern that with the town not being able to see it, again, they don't control once the appropriation comes over, it's yours.
Correct.
We understand. We're just concerned that should there be an issue with funding or deficits or anything like that, the town may not be able to react fast enough to help fix the problem.
So let me just address a couple.
And these are just our concerns, that's all.
Understood, no, and I wanted to, I'm speaking for myself here, but with respect to those concerns, a couple things about what you were saying. So the reason that there was always a shared system is that in the past, you gotta remember how everything worked, which was that all the reconciliations, all the checks, everything were all cut by the town finance department. So by absolute necessity, there was no way to do that without having a shared system. There were always some difficulties with that, just because, and Mrs. King, you can chime in and tell me where I'm wrong here, but there's a big difference between the timing of certain times that we need to close out our books, that we have different reports that are due to the Rhode Island Department of Education. They're on a very different schedule than the town, and so there were a lot of difficulties just because of those differences in scheduling and
Fully
everything.
agree.
So that was one of the impetuses to, doing this separation. With the school department no longer using the finance department to cut its checks, balance its general ledgers, handle its cash accounting, the need for the town to have, direct access went away. So it's not that it's, a nefarious purpose or anything like that. I understand your point with deficit, but remember, there's also a Rhode Island general law, and our council can chime in on that, that is very, very specific, that states that the school department needs to notify the town anytime, and it's the general, and the auditor general.
16-26.
Very familiar with it.
Right, so we're governed by that statute, and nothing changes that. So that would be the trigger that would immediately require the school department to notify the town finance director and town manager and auditor general in the event that there were even, an anticipated deficit.
Right.
Yes, fully aware of
So,
that.
with those things in play, I don't see what the point of, what the concern would be, basically.
Well, that's
And I understand
it's
the word concern,
It's
but
a concern, it's just a concern from the audit committee that there could be an internal control problem.
Okay.
I'm just reporting what we as a group have discussed
Sure.
and what our concerns are. Doesn't mean that it's gonna be a problem.
Yeah.
We're supposed to meet and explain what we see, and that's all
I
I'm trying to do.
understand.
I'm not saying, again, let me reiterate, I actually think that you guys controlling your cash account is a very, very positive thing. I think it does allow you to report your information a lot quicker, more accurate, and timely. We're just concerned about the overall internal controls
Yeah.
for the town, which you are a department of.
Sure.
That's all.
One
That's
other thing
all
to
we're
point out,
reporting.
and I don't know if you've been given this, I know the auditors have, and tell me if I'm wrong, but I believe you've reviewed them as well. As part of the implementation of the new systems, the finance department and Mrs. King spent a great deal of time coming up with some cash management procedures. I don't know if you folks have seen and reviewed these, but these are the very, very specific internal controls that were implemented within the finance department here at the school department because of the new responsibilities that they're taking on, and they wanted to make sure that they have all the procedures in play to take on that new responsibility and avoid, anything like that. The school department has a history of not having findings in the audit, and we want that to continue. And with
Absolutely.
this new, added responsibility, it being so important, that's why so much time was put in this document. Have you guys gotten this, or?
I don't think we have.
Okay,
And that would be
so-
great for our files, just to understand, again, we're just an oversight.
No, I understand,
we
but,
just-
but
and we-
if it helps your
I believe
members
you were
alleviate
the
your
auditors
concerns.
reviewed it, correct?
Right, am I?
Yeah.
But he's the auditor, we're the audit
Right.
committee.
There's
That's-
a-
But not everything he reviews, we review, Bob.
Do you mind passing that on?
No,
I'm
no, but I'm
happy to
saying
share my copy there.
He does attend your meetings.
I have two questions.
I would actually like to hear from Kyle. I hate to put him on the spot, but Kyle and I have had conversations about internal controls and any issues that he has seen in his experience with He has multiple clients that the school department and the town are not on the same platform. So I'd kind of like to hear from Kyle on that if we could. He and I have had several conversations about that.
Yeah, it's a case-by-case basis. When we come in to do an audit, we're looking at controls in all different areas. So we're going to look at the controls, the town's general controls. We're going to look at the school. We're going to look at the water department. And we're going to try to get an idea and an understanding of the internal controls throughout the entire town. I mean, it's a big town. There's a lot of departments. Have I seen instances where the school had internal control issues, but the town didn't, and they were on separate platforms? Certainly. Have I seen it where the internal control procedures, as far as the auditor is concerned, were adequate for both, and they were on separate systems? Certainly. And it's good to have the procedures written. It's another thing to follow through with them, and that's something that we test each year as well.
So part of the audit would be to make sure that those controls, having been put down as policy within the department, are actually being adhered to as well, correct?
Yeah, but the challenge would be that, this year for a 6/30/19 fiscal year end, we began our internal controls procedures in October.
Mhm.
So there is a delay
Right.
in when we're actually performing our procedures relative to your fiscal year end.
Of course. Yeah, and I mean, my point is just I want to make sure you folks have enough information to answer the question you're bringing to us. I think that documented and the points that I was making are what my answer would be to your concerns.
Perfect.
So
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Thank you. Again, we're just
I
basic
get it.
concerns.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Just quickly before we move on, did any other members? I'm talking a lot, and I'm not the only member of this committee, so I just want to see if anyone else had anything they wanted to chime in. Not quite yet. I'll rewind in a minute. Anything else on that topic? Okay. So,
I have two questions.
sure,
I'd
Mr.
like-
August.
Is our understanding correct that when the general ledgers are split off, the finance director will not have access, will not be allowed to access your general ledger?
That's correct.
You don't see that as a problem?
No, sir.
I'd phrase it differently. It's not so much that he would not have that. It's just the system is changing. So why would he need it?
Because he's a town treasurer. He's the only one that's statutory. He's the town treasurer.
But
And he's
the
responsible for the town finances.
entire
School
care and
department.
control of the school department under Rhode
Correct.
Island law
I
is
understand that.
so.
But
so
you're
we-
still a department of the town, notwithstanding that they have to fund you as
Yes,
agreed.
Correct.
in the budget. Okay.
but
But the
so
fact of the matter is, if the town treasurer is being denied access to your general ledger, that's regarded, to me, as somewhat of a problem in terms of internal control.
okay. So but we have two systems here. So we have a town finance director and treasurer who answer to the town manager, who answers to the town council, who are elected by the electors of North Kingstown. We have a statute, and I didn't create the system. The General Assembly did years ago. It would be a long conversation as to what I think they should have done when they created school committees and towns councils, because it unfortunately puts the two bodies at odds over things like this, which I think is completely crazy, but we have the system that we have. And under that system, we have a school department finance director who answers to a superintendent, who answers to a school committee, who is also elected by the town of North Kingstown electors. And we have and our attorney can chime in and tell me if I'm wrong, there's a Rhode Island general law, which I printed and put on my printer, and yet again forgot to bring what I printed in anticipation for the meeting. Mr. Jones knows it, which is 1629, which says the entire care, control, and management of all public schools and interests of the cities and towns shall be vested in the school committees of the several cities and towns. So once, as you described, the town council has an appropriation. They have the power of the purse strings. They can, within the rules of maintenance of effort and other statutes involved, reduce our budget or increase our budget as they see fit. But once that appropriation is made, the entire care and control of the schools is within the school department. So the town finance director doesn't really have a part to play now that we've separated out. They're no longer doing our reconciliations, no longer doing our books. And the answer as to the oversight, whether it's oversight through the town manager to the town council, or whether in this case it's oversight to the finance director to the superintendent to us, it's the same system, they're just parallel systems.
So your position is that the custody of cash is no longer the responsibility of the town manager?
or excuse me, town
Treasurer.
treasurer.
Well, they've turned over those accounts to us at this
But
point.
they haven't yet. The cash hasn't come in yet. I mean, it comes in on property taxes. Now, that's another concern that I have, is the
Yeah.
timing of the transfers
Signatories of
over.
our accounts are me and Dr. Ridgway.
No, that was not, please, Ms. Carroll, if you,
My
don't,
name's Mrs. King.
excuse me, Mrs. King, looking at the wrong name tag, my mistake.
Sure.
We're just looking at the fiduciary responsibility of the town treasurer as it relates to the custody and care of actual monies.
Sure.
Now, I understand that I understand your position right now. I believe that once he cuts the check over, or once they make the appropriation,
Right.
you feel that that person is no longer responsible. We're just an oversight body.
No, and
I'm
I
not
answer your
here.
questions, yeah.
I'm a firm believer in North Kingstown schools. I got 4 kids that have gone through it.
Mhm.
You guys have done a phenomenal job. We're just looking at the internal controls and trying to make sure that we, as an oversight body, have asked the right questions
Understood.
and doing that. So we'll continue to debate that particular issue, but that was just a concern
Sure.
that we've discussed amongst our committee.
Yeah, Mr. Jones?
Yeah. I just think it'd be an interesting position of having been on both the audit committee and the school committee. I'm sure that makes me unique in this room right now. I always think my first question is, are we better off today in the system we have now than we were 2 years ago? I mean, I would put that back to you all and say, there's all different ways of sort of slicing the point, but the general point is the citizens of the town expect its elected officials and the people they hire to manage to do the best job they can with the funds they give them to provide for the general welfare of the citizens. I think, as noted, there's a lot of different ways of managing stuff, and some are dictated statutorily, and some are done through agreements. But compared to when I was on the audit committee in 2012, and looking at the last 7 years, is the current place we're at, where, for example, I see monthly reconciliations being posted by the school department, and we've always posted the general ledger, but now monthly reconciliations, is the overall management and due diligence of finances for the town better off with the MOU and the system we have in place now, or where we were 2 years ago? Maybe
It's a rhetorical question, Bob. You know as well as I do, that's a
Okay.
rhetorical question.
Not
Well, if
really
the
here to
answer is
discuss that.
yes, right, unless you want to disagree, if the answer is yes, then if we're in a better place and we're moving forward to a better vision, then we can take concerns that are noted, but let's see if we keep improving. I would ask the auditor, based on where we're at now, would you expect next year's audit to be done better, quicker?
I hope that every year.
Well, I know that, but I mean, coming in from where you were this year and knowing where you're at as you end and thinking about FY20, would you anticipate for both sides that it's going to be better?
His firm didn't do the audit for fiscal year 2019, Bob, so that's not a fair question. In 2018, excuse me,
I
fiscal
know
year
that.
20.
They did 2019.
Yeah, but you're asking him to compare to prior years. He wasn't here prior years, so that's just a setup for drop it.
So-
I'm just asking, are we better off today than we were?
We're just here to discuss what some of our concerns are. And
Sure.
we'll be out of the way, we just have a couple more,
Yeah,
and
and-
we'll
I get
let
that.
you guys go to the regular thing.
Let me
We
ask
are
you-
in a better situation because we got a CAFR, and
Right.
we're done sooner. So not only is the school in a better position, but so is the town. And again, I'm not here to debate the politics between you and the town. I'm just here to discuss what our committee has discussed and meet our ordinance requirement.
And with respect to that, Mr. Jones brought up a point that I'd like to add something to, which is that I understand your concern, and so I'm trying to do what I can to sort of address the concerns with information and everything. I just want to make it clear that it's not a situation where the school department is going to be withholding information from the town, where they would not give information upon request. As Mr. Jones pointed out, we've begun to and we will continue to post our reconciliations as part of our, what they show up in is, they're actually part of our agenda. And, anyone, whether it's a citizen, the audit committee, or anyone who wants to, is going to be able to have access to those. And certainly any, specific requests, any information, any documentation is always, freely available between the two parties. We just had a meeting just yesterday where the finance director, we sat down with bond counsel, and they had some very specific information they need from the school department. We're going to work that out. We're going to get that to them right away. It's just a difference in the way the systems are working now because the process is completely different than it had been in the past. So you mentioned you had a couple other questions, and then we want to get to number 2.
Yeah, just a couple of simple things. We had some concerns with the timing of the cash flow being transferred, and we just want to make sure that you guys have, I would assume, have looked at your cash flow needs.
Well, that's in the memorandum of agreement, yes.
Yes, I understand that, but and making sure that that's going to facilitate your needs, because your financial requirements vary throughout the year. It's not consistent. So we were just concerned, and I'm assuming all parties have looked at it and made sure that the timing of the cash flow is
Yes,
fine.
and
Okay.
Ms. Key, got anything to add to that? I mean,
We
Yeah,
can
perfect.
manage cash flow,
Perfect.
yes.
And then, as far as any other items, we just always have, on the audit committee, have always had a concern with the student activity funds as it relates directly to the school. I'm sure you guys as a school committee also, because that's an area that we've had issues, known
Correct.
issues before. People have lost their jobs as a result of
Yes.
it. And, again, we know the auditor looks at it, but they don't look at it in high detail.
Sure.
They do some random testing, and again, that, we just want to communicate back as an audit committee, we know that there could be potential
Absolutely.
issues and exposures.
Our town has a very long memory, and I am aware of the concerns that you're referring to years ago. There have been a lot of changes that the school committee has implemented along with the finance department to tighten that up as well. So
Perfect.
those activity accounts are now within our accounting packages,
And
and
we
you
actually
can
had,
adjust.
it was either FY17 or FY18, we had a much more detailed audit on those student
Perfect.
activity funds, and all of that travels through the accounting package.
Right,
All
which
through
it never
workflow
used to.
and
It's now
Perfect.
part of everything else.
And-
Because I know why the school committees, I know why the school departments want to have the student activity funds so that they can be more flexible and move things quicker.
We've moved the other way.
Perfect, perfect, okay. And then
In
the,
fact, we now post the transactions monthly, and I think the superintendent and Mrs. King can attest that members of the school committee actually ask questions
They sure
about when they see certain expenditures that show up, to sort of ask why and
Why this check went here.
why and what was the reason, and didn't violate
All
purchasing
rules
rules.
are followed,
and everything.
whatnot.
okay, then the final thing I wanted to ask you guys as a school committee or school management, are there any internal controls or compliance issues that we should be aware of from our end, that you guys are aware of?
I would say no. Does anyone else have anything to add to that question?
Okay, finally, from our perspective, I know Mr. Jones comes to some of our meetings, but you guys are always welcome. They're really exciting meetings, so you're more than welcome anytime.
are
They're much more exciting than ours.
So I
We
want
usually don't have students demonstrating, however.
well,
Take away their field,
Yeah.
take away some of their money, and yeah, you might.
Well, we don't have
I
any
went
of
back up
that
to number 2,
authority.
but do you want to?
No, I just want to say, not only thank, because thankless that being on the audit committee can be, but also to Kurt, does an excellent job. You know,
Kyle.
No,
Kurt, our representative
Our-
on the committee.
you know, and I know Mark's not here, but I know Mark has given a lot of time and effort too, so thank all of you for this.
Well, we're going to go back to 2. We're not done. Okay.
At the end of the
Okay.
session, it's fine.
So, just wanted to rewind to number 2. Mr. Jones, do you want to speak to that specifically? or-
I did, I just thought it was important because we actually commissioned, and spent money on this, so I wanted Mrs. King to explain to the public why we did it, and sometimes they may not understand what OPEB means, so just to give a little, detail on that.
So actually, in February of 2019, Mr. Lathrop asked the school department if we wanted to do our own OPEB audit. And we did jump at that opportunity because we have never felt
Can
that.
I interrupt you for one
Yeah.
second, just for the rest of the world?
Other post-employment
Thank you.
benefits. We had never felt that we had the input and the insight that we should have into our numbers. As a matter of fact, we have, I believe it was the 2018 OPEB audit, which was an update. We were never even asked to provide updated information. So we were always concerned about the numbers that were presented, so we did jump at the opportunity to do our own audit. We went out to bid. We ended up with USI, which has done the town's audits in the past. And working very closely with USI, they could see that their assumptions on retirees and number of retirees and retirees that historically have taken post-employment benefits were wrong. So you can see from FY18 to FY19, the number drops to about a third of what it was. And that number in the $500,000 range is much more reasonable and much more where we thought over the many years that it would belong. So it's an important number to show. We, for people that don't understand, we are required to pay our pension liability to the state at every payroll. So there isn't, we function differently than the town does. So we're really glad to see this number and to continue the audit ourselves.
But just, can you speak to what the number was?
Yes, the number in 2018, our liability was representative of $1.8 million, just over $1.8 million. In FY19, with the correct assumptions, it's $557K. So it's gone down dramatically. So now it's more properly reflected historically, and the correct information has been given. So we don't expect that number to go. It doesn't move very often, very much.
What were the nature of the differences? You said the firm you retained changed assumptions?
No, they didn't change assumptions. They were actually the same firm that had done the audit in the past for the town. They actually took our input because we were actually commissioned them for the audit.
Mhm.
We were never, as a matter of fact, there were several years, even going prior administration, where we were just given the audit. It was final. We were never even asked for input. We were never asked for our details. So they made assumptions without passing them by us, and those assumptions related to the number of retirees in a year historically and the number of retirees that take those benefits historically.
Who is the they that you said they gave? Who is
USI.
Oh, USI.
USI,
Okay.
yes. I know that USI is not the town firm now, but they were just
Yep.
until recently.
Well, that's fantastic news for the taxpayers of North Kingstown.
Yeah, that was because I know citizens here, like Providence and other things, where the school department has millions of dollars of liabilities hanging out there, which, is money not spent on education. So I think it was a good finding to show that, and I'll give credit to prior school committees and within the administration that negotiated very favorable contracts with our employees to minimize that OPEB.
That's a very important point, and it's not tooting our own horn because we didn't do it. It's school committees years and years ago who established that there just are not that many, very few benefits that fall into that category that the school department's responsible for because of
No lifetime
care.
health care.
Right.
Ever.
So a lot of the ones that you see in other municipalities where you have lifetime health care or other benefits like that continue after employment ends, we simply don't have those in our contracts. So we've never had to negotiate them away or work with them. So it's helped us a lot, and we have prior school committees to thank for that. All right, so those are our three items. I think we
You
addressed.
wanted,
everything.
okay, so I have one question.
Yeah.
Speaking of extra reports, this, I believe, is the first year that there was a separate
Yes.
financial. Why did you want to separate out a school department report?
Well, we'd like to separate it out, first of all, because going forward, we'd like to have that report much more timely than what has been completed in the past. The audits have been very, very, very late in the 8 years that I've been here.
Mhm.
So now that the package has been built, we're comfortable that going forward, we're going to be able to, since the school department's audit can be completed more quickly, we'll be able to have that information more timely for the school committee. We begin our budgeting in the school department. They get the first draft in early January. It's very important that they have a document that they can work with that is, even though it's in draft form, that it's pretty solid numbers for the school department. And also, we have a lot of stakeholders that Although our scaled down financial statements are still 85 pages, it's still less than the 210 pages that the CAFR is. You know, we have a lot of people that ask questions for our grants and whatnot. They don't really know what to go through, through all those reports. So it's great that we have something that is specific related to the school department, and people can see that.
But you weren't suggesting that you're gonna have the audit in the future, the school department audit will be done before the town audit?
Our draft, we could probably get our draft financial statements before the whole town, absolutely.
So they would be unaudited?
They would be, yes, they would be draft. They would be draft financial statements because we were largely done in September, even,
Well,
October, so.
But we don't wanna give the impression that those are audited statements, clearly. If you're doing, that's not a problem if you wanna publish something earlier, but it's gotta be clear that it is a draft document.
Oh, absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. It's got draft on the document right now. It's coming to the school committee.
And it's just an example of, we just operate on different budget timetables.
Mhm.
I mean, the school department, while we're part of the town budget, but our entire budget calendar starts way before the towns do. So we start I'm just looking at some town representatives sitting there. We start our discussions because we need to get our budget to the town when you basically start working on your parts, but we're ahead, which is, causes all kinds of problems because there are all kinds of assumptions that need to be made with respect to our budget, that they're numbers that come out in April, May, June, and we're, submitting our budget way before that.
Not the least of which is the amount of state aid.
State aid,
State aid, yes.
health insurance, right, so giant numbers.
Charter school.
Charter school enrollments.
Are after when we have to submit our budget.
They're all guesses, and they come out after. But again,
I think also just another principal point, we, obviously the school department pays the share for an audit, for the work, and so that thing, and then I would just say in the past, should I give credit to the audit committee's recommendation and our new audit team, is prior auditors would either not come to the school committee because of, they hadn't got to the town in a timely manner, or they would come unprepared to talk school financials. And so having those draft sort of statements kind of gives us a little assurance that, the information we need is we're going to see. I think it'll be less of an issue because on our agenda tonight, we have an auditor presentation, which is probably the earliest in my 7 years of being on the school committee that an auditor's actually spoken to the school committee.
So we they're the new firm this year.
Yes, that's
So
why.
we as the audit committee spend a lot of time
Yes, that's why I was
discussing
commending you
this
on-
issue.
on picking
And
a
that,
good
and that's why the
recommendation.
firm that was here last year is no longer with us. It progressively got worse. We're fully aware of that issue. I think going forward that, a combination of the two teams that are in place and the fact that you guys are assuming more of the workload on the internal accounting will hopefully alleviate some of the pressure on the town and their information. I think things are much more organized, and hopefully going next year, we won't be doing this the financial statements won't be issued in a month after, it'll be issued hopefully sometime in December. So we think from the audit committee that the entire group, the town and the school are going in the right direction.
I agree. And again, I want to thank you, I think the real takeaway from this meeting needs to be, I want to thank you folks for coming, because we have a requirement that we haven't been fulfilling. And I think it's really important, both as Mr. Jones mentioned, that we're able to speak with the auditors and that the auditors send someone who's prepared. As he mentioned, I've been at a meeting where we had a representative, we asked them very specific questions. We have an oversight responsibility, and the person that they had sent was completely unprepared to talk about the things that we wanted to talk about. This is an important dialogue. I understand your concerns. I want to make sure that we're able to address them, and keep this dialogue open. And I know Dr. Ajay wanted to.
Yeah, Mr. Wadovic, you mentioned, going back in enterprise account problems and all that. I was the assistant superintendent at the time, and I watched that firsthand, the problems with that, and people did get fired over management of accounts. In my first fall as superintendent, we had to report to the town that we anticipated the possibility of a deficit. We did not have a deficit that year. We had a surplus. But I understand the significance of good financial management, and I want to commend Mrs. King and Mr. Janelle We have now 5 years in a row of a meritorious budget award. That means that we go the long way about doing our budgeting. It's a massive report. It's a lot of work that other districts are just not doing to make sure they're that transparent about the money. And over all those years, the things have gotten a lot better, and even right into this year with these moves that we're making now. So I just want you to know, and I want our whole community to know, that we're taking this very seriously, and we pride ourselves on having many, many years now of solid financial management with no concerns for our auditors.
All right, so again, we're going to have to do this again, and we will, because we're supposed to. And this is the first of annual meetings that we'll have with you folks. And we're happy to hear from you with any concerns that you may have. And again, if there is specific documentation that anyone is looking for, the school committee is certainly going to provide it to anyone that needs it.
And again, if there's any issues that you guys foresee between either the school, the town, or anything that you have as far as internal control that you want the audit committee to further pursue or be aware of, please do not hesitate, through your committee or through your representative, Kurt.
Thanks very much.
So,
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
So we're going to have a recess. The school committee will reconvene an executive session at 7 p.m. for our agenda. We're going to have a recess. Thank you, guys. I could ask everyone to please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Mr. Glassbach?
Here. Sorry. I realized I meant to do something a second ago. Yes, here.
You've thrown me off. Mrs. Hildebrand? Here. Mrs. Hoskins?
Here.
Mr. Jones?
Here.
Mr. Mather?
Here.
Mrs. Shaw? Joe Vento?
Here.
And Ann Etchells? Here.
And what I meant to do, I apologize. If we could all please rise for a moment. I'd like to ask, please have a moment of silence for a longtime North Kingstown bus driver who passed away early this morning, and that's Bob Morton of bus number 9. So if you could please have a moment of silence. Thank you. Okay, we did the roll. If you could please call the calendar.
Tuesday, February 18th, 2020, there's a school committee business meeting.
Thank you. So next we have presentation and recognitions. You said you
No
folks are all
recognitions this evening.
set for recognitions. So just a quick programming note. Item E1, we're not going to have this evening. That student presentation is just not going to happen tonight. So next would be item E2, which is the auditor's presentation of the school department fiscal year 19 financing statements.
So we are, this is Kyle Connors from Markham. He's been the lead on our FY19 audit. Markham is a new organization, a new firm for the town for FY19. And this is the first year that the North Kingstown School Department will have separate financial statements that's just about the school department. And the reason why we wanted to go down this road is because although I know it looks a little silly that our scaled down statements are 85 pages, the bigger town-wide CAFR, it's called, financial statements, are over 200 pages. So it's important, we think, that we have this. It's important for some of our stakeholders when they want information just about the school department, even though we can lead them in both directions. And we're confident that now that these statements have been built, next year, if the audit goes as smoothly as it has gone for the school department over the last several years, these financials will be earlier. They will have draft on them because they are a draft until the entire town financials are final, but at least you will have some information leading into budget time. It's a more formal document than just me giving you some comparison numbers from the prior years. There's footnotes, there's a lot of other comparisons that I might not give you. So it's a really great document just about the school department.
And any, so just question and answer at this point?
Yeah. I mean, Kyle, do you have anything that you would like to point out to the committee or?
Certainly. So, hi, thank you for having me.
You're
Kyle Connors. I'm here here on behalf of Markham, and it's always a challenge when you switch, you transition to new auditors because there's new questions that are being asked, and we always get the old auditors didn't ask us that. So hopefully we didn't make everyone's life here too difficult, but it was a very smooth transition. I thought we had a great working relationship with Mary and Steve and Stephanie, and I thought it was a good audit this year. I can walk you through the financial statements page by page if you want. If you prefer, I can answer questions.
I don't know about page by page, because it's how many pages?
I don't necessarily,
Page by page.
I can do highlights.
I have no problem with a broad overview of highlights, that's fine.
Great,
Yeah.
okay. If anyone's following along, page 6 of the financial statements. This is your balance sheet, and page 7 is your statement of revenues and expenditures, which is basically your income statement. If you were to look at your school unrestricted fund, which is your school general fund, you'd see that at the end of fiscal year 19, you had about $1.86 million worth of what we consider to be assigned fund balance. This is money that is left over for the school to use at its discretion. That represents about 2.8% of your final budget. Typically speaking, we see school departments carry anywhere between 2 and 5% of their budget. So you're at 2.8%. In fiscal 19, you ended with a deficit of about $85,000. And I just want to point out on that deficit, there was a good amount of money that was transferred to the school capital project fund.
Can I stop you? Because we've gotten some questions on that, so I just want to make it clear, and you can, A, correct me when I'm wrong, and then expand a little bit about it. That does not mean we ran an operational deficit. It simply means that we used funds from, say, fund balance or a prior year in that year that exceeded our total money coming in, correct? And I'm not an accountant, so I apologize for...
So we used our savings account.
Bingo.
So that's basically
Correct, so
what
it's
that
not
is.
so we just had some conversations at our prior meeting about deficits. That is not the type of deficit we're talking about.
Correct.
Correct, just want to be clear.
Yep. Had the money not been transferred to your capital project fund, you would have shown a surplus.
Okay, got it, thank you.
And that money was transferred to the school capital project fund to fund one-time expenses that you wouldn't necessarily,
Non-recurring item, yeah.
non-recurring items, and also by paying it out of your savings account, just like if you didn't put it on a credit card, you have some interest savings
Right, just by not bonding.
by not bonding or leasing. Correct. The next couple pages, pages 7 and 8, are what we call our enterprise funds. Basically, in your enterprise funds, what they should be doing individually is raising enough money via user charges, user fees to cover the costs. If you were to look at your primary 4 enterprise funds, which are your school lunch, your computer repair and maintenance program, athletic gate receipts, and your sports camp, all 4 raised enough fees in fiscal 19 to cover the expenses. There's one additional fund, which is your after-school summer fund. I believe that was closed in fiscal 19. So you're going to see it reported here this year, and most likely, Mary, correct me if I'm wrong, you won't see it reported there next year. You'll just have those
Just
4
the
funds.
history of it. Yeah, we had to shut that down because we no longer are allowed to charge for summer school.
Charge our students. for summer
Correct.
school.
Charge our students, you're right, Mr. Jones.
Another thing that's important to note, too, is while you should be raising funds to a level where you can cover your expenditures, you don't necessarily want to be raising a significant amount more funds than you're expending out. And if I was to focus on one, which would be your school lunch program, you had enough revenues to cover your operating costs by about $8,000 on almost $1 million. So it's functioning, appears to be functioning correctly. Jump to page 11. This is your student activity funds. There's $334,000 reported at the end of fiscal 19. This is an increase from the prior year of about $15,000. And I know that we completed some testing that Mary probably hadn't seen in previous audits, and we tried to look at some of your cash receipts and cash disbursements at a more transactional level to determine if you were complying with your disbursements and receipt policies. Had we had something significant to bring to your attention, we would have included it in as a finding. We obviously did not. That doesn't mean that we looked at everything in, with a fine-tooth comb, but we did perform some procedures over your student activity accounts. As we get into the notes of the financial statements, I want to point out on page 26, there was only one fund that at the end of fiscal year 19 was left in a deficit. It was a special revenue fund of about $868. So you don't really have any funds that are in a true deficit other than that one. What we included in your financial statements are two disclosures for two pension plans. The first of which on page 30 is your MERS plan. The reason we included it is this is going to pick up all of your general employees other than your teachers. The challenge is that it's also picking up town employees. So the state doesn't give us the ability to say, okay, this is a school's piece, this is the town's piece, and I'm only reporting to the school piece. So it's everyone, and it's going to be the full liability. But if we jump to page 34, you're going to see that overall your general plan through the state is a net pension liability of about $19.9 million. That plan is funded at about 72%. And what I always like to point out is it's a state pension plan. So if you wanted to fund it at 100%, the state isn't going to allow you to. They're going to tell you what your required contribution is. You've been making that required contribution, and you're kind of left with whatever the liability is at the end of the year based on the market, based on a lot of assumptions. One of the more important assumptions being on page 35 is your discount rate. Now, historically speaking, the state has been using a discount rate of 7.5% or 7.25%. What that really means is the assets that are associated with the total liability, if they work at 7%, what does that mean to how does that impact your total liability? Well, if they worked at 8% or if they worked at 6%, you can see on page 35 it has a pretty significant impact on your total liability. We're talking 1 percentage point is about $6 million. So they're using 7%. That's pretty standard across the board. Of course, if things change in the economy and your assets aren't working at the level that you would prefer them to, it's going to be a significantly higher liability. And that's out of the control, again, of the town. But I want to point it out now because when I talk about your OPEB plan, that's a little bit more within the control of the town because it's a private plan. On page 39, we break out the teacher's pension plan. Now, this is solely the school department's liability, and in the sense that there are no town employees within the plan. Overall, the total net pension liability is almost $93 million. The state takes on a proportion of that, and the school is left with a total net pension liability of $53.2 million. That's funded at about 54%. Again, same scenario. You can't fund it more than what it's currently funded at, even if you had wanted to. If you jump to page 44, you're going to see the same exact schedule that we were just looking at, which is your discount rate. 7% is the standard that's been used by the state across all of their plans. And again, you can see the significant increase or decrease in the liability based on the rate of return for your assets. I should say the state's assets. On page 46 is when we begin to talk about the school's OPEB plan, which I know Mary alluded to in our previous meeting. There is a significant change in the way that the liability for the school department was calculated in fiscal 19 compared to fiscal 18. And based on historical data, the school department was able to say, okay, we've got 27 retirees. Only maybe 25 to 30% of those retirees are actually electing the medical and dental coverage until they turn 67. So at such a third of the enrollment rate of what you were calculating at the year before, you're going to see a pretty significant dip in your total liability, decreasing from about $1.8 million last year, which you can see on page 47, down to $556,000. So, a little less than a third of what the total liability would be. Right below that on page 47 is the same discount rate that we were looking at for the pension plans. Now you can see that the discount rate you're using is 3.5%, and you might ask, well, why is the state assuming the assets are going to work at 7%, but we're assuming that our assets are going to work at 3.5%, and it has to do with the fact that the school doesn't have any plan assets associated with their OPEB fund. So the GASB standards mandate that you have to use 3.5%. So even if you wanted to use a higher discount rate to lower your liability, without plan assets, you wouldn't be able to do that. The next page, on page 48, is another critical assumption that goes along with your OPEB liability, and that's your healthcare trend rates. Currently, you're using an 8% assumption that healthcare costs are going to increase 8% a year, trending down to 5%. That's pretty industry standard. I haven't seen a lot that's significantly different from that. So again, you can see it has a pretty significant impact on your overall liability, but it's right within the realm of what we're accustomed to seeing. Page 59 might be one of the more important schedules in here to bring to your attention, and that is the school unrestricted fund budget versus actual. And if we were to look at page 59, you'd see that overall your total revenue came in $380,000 higher than anticipated. A good chunk of that money has to do with tuition. Tuition came in about $323,000 higher than anticipated. That's a challenging line item to budget for. Very much like your special education costs are a very difficult line item to budget for. So you had a favorable variance in your tuition revenue, and your state aid was about $111,000 lower than what was anticipated, which compared to the total budget of $10.2 million isn't too significant of a percentage. And again, the state aid can be a real challenge to try to plan for too. They aren't always you're not always getting what you're assuming you're getting. Overall, in your salaries and your fringe and professional service costs, they all came in under budget, not by a significant amount compared to what the total budget is. But again, especially with the professional services, that can be a challenging line to budget for. That's where your special education costs are located. The rest of the financial statements are basically a breakout of your individual funds for all your non-major funds. And the reason I want to point it out is just because I think it promotes transparency when you're not just showing on your balance sheet or your income statement, okay, we've got our school unrestricted fund, our capital project fund, and everything else. And you can't really see what makes up everything else. But both the town and the school department include every single fund, every balance sheet, every income statement that makes it up. So I think that it speaks a lot to the transparency of both the town and the school department.
Ken, just on the point though, I agree with you. I guess at some point you sort of go though, how many of these major non-governmental funds are too much when they're carrying like a $2 balance? Like, how do we just either make them go away or, I mean, it just seems like a lot of effort of some of these to maintain for what may have been legacy stuff that just because there's a few dollars in there, don't go away.
I can actually address that, Mr. Jones. So there are some funds that were set up in trust. We have one for 1920 something, but we do have some information from legal counsel on what we can do with those funds. And I need to present that to the school committee to make sure that you're all set with that. We needed to go the legal route first. So that's probably going to close down 4 or 5 of these based on your approval and legal input. So that will help on some of those smaller ones. Because you're right, Mr. Jones, some of them, there's 2 cents a year that's coming in through interest, and it's just, they're so old, it's crazy to keep them on our books. But we have done the work on that. Looking into those, it's not an easy thing because we hardly have any information going back that far, but we did dig up what we could.
And to your point too, there's 58 of them, so that is a considerable amount of funds. It's not.
The town
It
is
is.
more. That's
Mhm.
yeah. It just seems like I didn't know we had an Asbel Hendrick library.
Can I ask a question, Mary? McKinney-Vento, you have an even and an odd, what is that? Why is there a two?
I believe those are different grants that go out every other year, so it's,
Yeah, every
you,
other
you received
year.
it in an odd year or an even year.
Okay, so that's why one is 0 and one.
Yeah, so it bounces back and forth.
Any other questions? All right, well, thank you very much.
Oh,
Well,
I'm
wait,
sorry.
yeah.
I didn't know you were done.
I thought you were done. Are you?
I can continue
Oh,
to
all
answer
right, I thought
questions,
you were pretty
but
close to the end. Okay, sorry.
absolutely.
It's an issue we talked about when we had our first meeting, which is the unreconciled balance for FY19
In the cash account.
in the cash account.
Okay.
I guess my question is, how are you resolving that in the overall audit? It's not hanging out there in the overall audit, is it?
wasn't significant enough that it would hold up the audit. From the
Okay.
standpoint of, I think it was a $15,000
Right.
variance.
I would tell you that the students and others may beg to differ on the meaning of $15,000.
I would too. I could use an extra $15,000. But
But I guess
from
my- I
a
guess
from
my
a
general
materiality
question is-
standpoint,
Right, I
from an
understand.
audit standpoint,
Correct. But I mean, at some point, something has to be done, right? I mean, generally it's gonna be written off, is that? and again,
Yeah,
I only stayed at a Holiday Inn, so,
you could bring us in and have us try to figure out one way or the other what should be done. I don't know how long that would take.
And that wouldn't be for us to do, so to be clear here. So on July 1st, 2019, the town was responsible for reconciling the school department cash up through June 30th, 2019. July 1st, 2019, we were supposed to have a clean transfer. The town was unable to reconcile approximately $11,000. It's in the notes from the reconciled cash that I've been presenting to you. We're carrying that as the only unreconciled item. So Kyle's point, that, in my opinion, is not for us to pay for, no offense, finding out what the town couldn't figure out, again, for the 8th year in a row. Although the amount is significantly smaller than it has been, it's still the point of that the agreement was that cash was supposed to be reconciled timely and accurately, and they're $11,000 short on our end. I can bet that if they were $11,000 over, we wouldn't have gotten $11,000 more in our transfer over. So while I understand Kyle's point that it's not material to him, it does need to be addressed somewhere, some way, because we're carrying it as an unreconciled item. You'll see that in all of our reconciling, our monthly reconciliations.
right, I guess just my general question is, wouldn't the standard recommendation be to write it off?
Yeah, the standard. I mean, I can't give a recommendation on it because we haven't done the research to figure out what it is.
And that's outside of the scope of your task at this point.
Correct.
We're just sort of stuck in the situation of this is just gonna keep floating out until it's done.
Well, I really do
Won't it have
think
to
we
be
need
dealt
to.
with in the FY20? I mean, at some point, it has to be dealt with, wouldn't it?
I think we need to address it with the town manager again. He's aware of it. Dr. Ogier and I have had several conversations with him about it way back when, maybe in September, October timeframe. Again, yes, they were able to reconcile much closer than they have in past years, but that's not really the point. It's kind of hard to be on the receiving end of $11,000 short because that's just really not how it should be. So hopefully we can work with the town manager and we can come to some sort of resolution.
Any other questions, Ben, all right.
One thing that we did speak about briefly in the previous meeting that I don't know if you want me to just readdress it was our compliance audit. Every entity that receives more than $750,000 worth of federal funding, we're required to perform a single audit. And in the fiscal 19 single audit, we selected 3 separate programs, 2 on the town side, 1 on the school side. And on the school side, we selected a special education program. What we're required to do is basically make sure that that money is being spent appropriately, that it's being reported appropriately, that you're spending more from a local standpoint on a per pupil basis than you were in the prior year. And through all of our compliance testing for the special education program, we had no non-compliance to bring to your attention. So
Which is good news. Thank you.
there's a lot of work on the part of the finance team and the compliance team to make sure that you're in good standing. So
And if
should be
I could
recognized.
just take 2 minutes, that team is Steve Janelle, our controller, Stephanie Russo, our assistant controller, and then we have a very small finance staff. We have 2 payroll clerks, for 600 plus paychecks that go out of here every 2 weeks. That's Joanne Fuller and Dina Anderson. And then all the rest of the money and receivables and payables are, processed out of here. $70+ million by Cheryl Short and Eileen McGivney. And I do also want to say, special thanks to Alicia Jones. She's our benefits coordinator, but she does help quite a bit with payroll. So we really do run on a small staff, and they do a really good job on keeping on top of everything.
Thank you very much. And Mrs. King, thank you very much for you and your staff's hard work on putting this together with them as well.
So exciting.
No, but it's important information. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
for coming
Thank
out.
you.
Thank you.
Okay, so next item on the agenda would be citizens' comments. I don't know if anyone signed up to speak. Okay. Hi, and as you know, you can move the microphone down, and we ask that you please limit your comments to 3 minutes. State your name and address for the record. Thank you.
Cassidy Snyder, 10 Coriander Lane. I'm here once again to advocate for a revision to the school facility use policy so high school dances and other student-led organizations are not negatively affected by the 15% tax implemented of the policy. Last week, members of the committee stated a resolution may not be voted on and adopted until April. And waiting on the state will further negatively affect many organizations. At that point, budget season will be upon us and important monetary decisions will have been made already. For example, the Junior Class Council has been trying to plan a Spring Fest for a couple months, and we're currently on hold to do that just because we don't know how much money we're going to have to do that, and everything is really up in the air right now. Thus, I'm submitting a written request to the school committee to add to a discussion on the currently tabled language regarding the school facility use policy to their agenda for informational purposes only, in accordance with the Rhode Island General Laws subsection 42466B. So this matter can be discussed sooner, which would benefit many school department organizations. Thank you and good night.
Thank you. Well, I mean, so I don't have any issue with having a brief discussion about it. So you know, we do not have to put it on our agenda. We are, if it's in writing, we can, correct? We can turn by legal counsel.
Correct.
No, under,
You're allowed.
hold on, I've asked my lawyer, sorry.
I don't understand what.
So what she's saying is, so under Rhode Island general law, you have to cite. I
No,
can pull it up.
under Rhode Island general law, if somebody comes to public comment,
Yep,
the school committee can add to their agenda.
for discussion purposes only.
Right. Now, I recommend that you don't, because you have consistently not. And if you start to allow some to add and others not, you're gonna get into a problem later on. So it's my recommendation that you need to be consistent with everybody. So we will get into a legal problem in the event that people then turn around and ask for it and you say no.
Okay. So I have to take the opinion of my lawyer here, and again, the issue is treating everyone equally, because we don't want to have a situation where, you know, there are times when we have meetings that are filled with 500 angry people. You've seen a meeting with, forget the capacity of our room, but we've had a lot more people than are here tonight.
Yep.
Theoretically, every one of those people could do what you just did and would have a very strong argument to say, well, we let you do it, why won't we let them?
Yeah.
So we very much hear what you are saying, and we will take your comments under advisement, and you know, we're not dismissing what you're saying, but under the advice of our attorney, I don't want to add it to our agenda today for that reason. But thanks. We can't really do back and forth, but thank you very much.
She's just asking us to add it to any.
No, she's asking tonight,
Right,
right?
no,
Or you mean in the
no,
future?
yes.
Oh, then I completely misunderstood you.
One before April, so that they can get their budgets done.
Then we're all on the same page. Okay.
Should accept.
We will take your, yes, we will take your comments, absolutely. I misunderstood what you're trying to
too. I
do.
thought it was.
We thought you were asking for us to talk about it tonight.
Oh, no, sorry.
Okay, sorry.
We're not discussing.
Got it. Okay, so anyone else want to speak? So, taking care of citizens' comments. Next, I'm going to move something up. We had had the potential of having a continued executive session at the end of this meeting this evening. That's not going to be necessary. So for that reason, I'd ask unanimous consent to move the items that are under item 9 on our agenda up now. I don't hear any objection. So I'm going to take those now, which is to ask for a motion to seal the executive session minutes of this evening, February 4th, 2020. I have a motion from Ms. Hoskins, second from Ms. Hildebrand. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and any opposed? Passes unanimously, and I can disclose that no executive session votes were taken at this evening's executive session. So, next, we are at our consent agenda, and do any members have any items they would like to exempt? Mr. Mather?
Exempt B1 and 2.
E1 and 2, any others? Okay, hearing none, I would ask for a motion to approve the non-exempted consent agenda items.
So moved.
I have a motion.
Second.
And a second. A motion from Ms. Hoskins, second Ms. Hildebrand. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Next, we have items B1 and 2. If I could have a motion to approve items B1 and 2.
So moved.
Motion from Ms. Hoskins,
Second.
second Ms. Hildebrand. Any discussion?
I'm
All
just
the- yeah,
exempting 'cause I wasn't here.
So all
You're
those in,
abstaining.
yeah, all those in
Abstaining.
favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Mr. Mather's going to abstain from that vote. So that concludes the consent agenda. Next item on the agenda is item D1, which is the memorandum of agreement with Davisville Academy. If I could have a motion to approve item D1.
So moved.
Motion from Mr. Jones,
Second.
second from Ms. Hoskins. Any discussion? I'll just briefly mention, I want to thank the administration and also the union for their hard work on this in putting it together for us. So there's no other discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Next, item E1, if I could have a motion to approve item E1. Well, motion first, then we'll talk.
You mind if I make
Oh,
a motion?
go right.
Or a motion to,
I will make a motion to approve item E1 with the amendment that changes the language in terms of the financial literacy requirement from enrolling in a course to passing the course.
No problem with that.
okay, and, yeah,
Second.
we have a second, so it's motion, Mr. Jones.
Where,
Second, Ms. I was gonna say, I want a little clarity on
Yeah.
exactly where that word is, so I'm
this
pulling
point
it up.
simply says that the language that was presented and talked about from last time that speaks to students starting with the class of 2024 will have to take one of these. It changes from just taking the class, that proficiency is from not only enrolling in the class, but passing the
right
class.
here? Oh, down here?
So can you just point out where it's, so, alright, so I've got it.
Okay.
So it would
Yeah.
change page 6, it would change page
Yep.
Before the page 24.
Page 6, in addition to the above listed requirements, students and thing must meet a .5 financial literacy proficiency by
Got it.
passing
Right here.
one of the following, enrolling and passing in one of the following courses.
Okay.
I just think the point is enrolling is not sufficient
Yeah, I agree.
to demonstrate proficiency.
And no objection from the superintendent.
That was the intention all along.
Okay.
Happy to do it.
So we have a motion on the table and a second, right? We
Your
have,
students would concur?
passing's better than just enrolling. Otherwise,
Yeah.
your life would be a lot easier. Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you for your hard work on that. Next, we have a school committee decision regarding a student hearing. So I'm gonna make a motion here, and the motion is to uphold the superintendent's recommendation regarding student A. That, Ms. Carroll, that's sufficient, I just wanna make sure we word that right. If I could have a second? Second, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Next, we have the 2018-19 school budget. Anything?
And after tonight, we could cross that off, we don't have to put that in there anymore.
All right, and we move on though. Anything on the 2019-20 school budget?
No.
2021 school budget?
Yes, so I'm probably repeating myself, but
Calendar.
yes. Next meeting, February 18th. you must vote on a number, a budget number for us to present to the town manager. So we are required to send the package to the town manager by March 2nd. It's a little bit later this year, it all depends on how the calendar falls. But when I say a number, what I mean is that if you want something to be changed in the budget, added to the budget, moved around from the budget, deleted from the budget, we need specifics, because you can't just say, superintendent, could you please go and see what you can do about moving this around or moving that around. You have to vote on an actual number that we send over to the town council. So I just want to be clear on that. That Tuesday, February 18th, that's really kind of our last shot at doing that. If something happens with that meeting, we'd have to schedule something again pretty quickly so that we can get that done and get it over there. What I normally do is when you vote on the number that is the request to the town for the town property allocation, I usually send that to the town manager and then follow up a few days later with the actual budget package, and you guys will get your budget package as well. So if you have any questions between now and then, let us know. I'll literally be sitting there with my spreadsheet that one change, and it'll automatically tell you what all your changes are. But if you have anything between now and then, feel free to let Dr. Ajay or I know.
Yeah, so the way to handle that is to send an email to Mrs. King, Dr. Ajay, just saying, you know, I was thinking about adding this program, removing this program, tweaking this program. That way they can come back and tell you, okay, the financial impact of that will be this. Because otherwise, if you say, you know, I want to remove this class from the high school, then Mrs. King doesn't have time to know what the financial impact of that is, and we need to vote on the budget to the dollar, to the penny. So we just can't have something come up at the last second.
You're going to be voting on the enterprise fund, you're going to be voting on the grants, you're going to be voting on every single thing. That's how we've always done it in the past, and we forward it over to the town manager, who then, he happened to say at another meeting we were in yesterday that his budget presentation is on March 12th, I think he said, which is a Thursday. So anyway, so that's what he'll be shooting for.
Okay, Mr. Jones.
You're right. I owe you that sooner than later. Just a general comment, and may dovetail to what the comment that was made. So we're going to be talking about a $60 million budget without knowing if state aid is good, the charter school lottery hasn't happened, health insurance, yet we still have to have a number. So I would say, if you're in a situation where you still have confusion or concern over a budget you're planning, you still need to plan. You can have scenarios, this may happen, this may happen, this may happen, but you can't let the fact you don't have a definite answer prevent you from planning. Plan for additional scenarios, because we're going to submit a budget without all these. They may change. We'll have to come back in April and cut stuff or add, but cut stuff. We don't know what the town's going to give us. So don't let the fact you don't know everything prevent you from planning. A budget's just a plan of priorities.
And a budget is a budget, and things change. But what we budget today is not going to be what the final ends up being, because you just can't get everything exact to do this.
So the rest of the calendar, too, to remind you, is on March 20th, and I believe it's about 9:30 is what the town clerk has told me, is when Dr. Ajay and I will go before the town council. That's their whole budget workshop day, and we'll be there on that day. That's a Friday. After that, on Monday, April 6th, and it's usually in the evening, 6 or 7 o'clock at night, is the actual public hearing on the entire town budget. They usually do separate for the town and then separate for the school department. And then sometime around May 4th, 5th, around that time frame, is when the town will actually vote on what the final town FY21 budget looks like. And we try to get what we can together for you, because usually what happens is that meeting, the next school committee meeting, is right there. So we might have to be working behind the scenes to actually present something to you that evening, depending on what we have to do with that budget number. In other words, we probably will not be in your agenda package for that. We'll have to discuss it when we come up on that meeting, because they're so close together. But that's the timeline that we have ahead of us.
Okay. So moving on is CIP, existing bond, future bond. moving on to some policies. Proposal to delete policy IKC. I have a motion to approve item E1.
So moved.
A motion
Second.
and a second. A motion, Ms. Hoskins, second, Ms. Hildebrand. Any discussion? Mr.
Yes,
Jones?
real quick. So I support deletion because it's a pretty unwieldy policy
It's a
at this
really
point.
old policy. Do you see what it
Yes.
dates back to?
I just wanted, and I asked the superintendent to clarify that just because we're deleting this policy doesn't mean that if a student has a legitimate need for class rank, for scholarship or transcripts or something,
It is provided.
that the high school still has the ability to provide it.
That was my question too, but it won't be,
We're not,
It's not this.
right, it won't be publicized, it'll be on an individual basis if they need to ask.
So how do you determine whether or not the individual needs their rank?
Dr. Shea, you wanna-
Say that again?
How do
would-
you determine whether an individual needs their rank or not?
They tell us. So if a college is asking you say, on an application that you need to put your rank there, we will provide that for you.
So would a student theoretically need to submit like a written or some sort of formal request?
Normally, you're doing that kind of work alongside your guidance counselor, so.
Sometimes.
Yeah, so if you feel that you need it, you can contact your guidance counselor, and they'll provide it for you. Yeah.
Any other questions? We had a motion and a.
But I just want to say, I mean, and Dr. Mansuri knows this too, I mean, this is the, school systems all around the country are going away from this. It's been something that people would fixate over in a real kind of obsession kind of way, and it was getting in the way of a lot of things, including people taking coursework that they would prefer to take. Because, you know, if I take that course, I don't get that, you know, fraction of a point extra on my GPA, and that will affect my class rank. And we don't want people to be focusing on that as much. And colleges are telling us it just doesn't matter to them as much as other factors. So
Are you
they're
concerned
not
about those
affected.
individual students becoming focused on those numbers?
Excuse me?
Are you concerned about those individual students becoming focused on those numbers?
Yes.
Like the individual students who are requesting to see their rank for those
If someone requests it for the purposes of an application, we will provide it. If there's an organization that needs it from you, we're happy to take care of that for you.
So I think the,
But the student would then find out, which kind of, so then they still know.
well, I think the idea is that the administration doesn't want to get, if you're applying to a college, and part of your, and tell me if I'm not getting it wrong, but if you're applying to a college and the college application is requesting that they say we require your class rank, the school department is not going to prevent you from filling out your college application. They'll provide it if you need it. But you would need to come to them and show that you're actually applying to a school that's saying, we need this. If you just say, oh, I'd like to know what it is, then you're not gonna find it out. So presumably, most people aren't going to need it, particularly with
Fewer
colleges
of those
require,
requests that are
even
out
asking
there.
for it.
Maybe a college application or a scholarship you're applying for, but fewer and fewer we're finding, even asking.
It's not running until seventh semester anyway.
So I think that's the idea behind it.
Yeah, I would also say that I'm guessing that that's covered by the FERPA law, so I think a concern that just students would, you know, want to get it just to start sharing and all that. We would have to be careful about that. I think that's the point of having a legitimate
Right.
purpose and some kind of formal way to apply. Because
You
right,
need to
we
show
don't want
what you
students
needed it
just
for.
asking to ask, right?
Yeah, or
First
submitting
semester
a,
freshman probably doesn't have a need to ask.
or trying to apply to something that requires it just to find out.
Well, you've got to balance that against,
Yeah.
you know, messing somebody up. Oh, sorry, I can't apply to this school because my school won't give you my class rank and you won't accept me without it. So we've got to balance that.
We actually have a new policy that has done this years ago. We just never deleted the old policy. That's the problem. So this has been in action for several years now.
We're just cleaning up.
Just a cleanup job here.
So we had a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Next, proposal to delete item, policy CEA. If I could have a motion? A motion from Ms. Hoskins, second from Ms. Hildebrand. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. And a motion to delete policy GCD/GDD. I could have a motion to remove that policy. I have a motion from Ms. Hoskins. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Jones. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? And we have a policy revision, which is the revision of policy IHCA. If I could have a motion to approve. So motion, Ms. Hoskins.
Second.
Second, Ms. Hildebrand. Any discussion?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
My only concern in the language is the paragraph that speaks to that the primary purpose of summer school is, or it's kind of a negative, that summer school does not exist for students seeking to advance. And while I understand the point, I just believe we should have flexibility in there that summer school should exist for credit remediation, for enrichment if possible, and for student advancement if possible, with the understanding that really any summer school course, especially with the change by the state, is still always subject to the administration's discretion, that the course won't run if it's not financially or operationally viable.
So is there specific language you want to change, or you're just mentioning a concern, or?
Well, my two concerns were the use of the word qualifying. I think we should just have students. And
Which
line-
paragraph's that in? So that's the Oh, the red cloth.
I think it's just the opportunity for students, right?
Well,
Qualifying is sort of at the discretion of if the course runs or not.
Not simply that. It has to do, a student can't remediate for a summer school course with just any grade they've obtained in the course. I don't recall the exact number, but it may be, like you have to have like a 50 average or better
Yes.
to be generally qualifying to take a remedial course in summer school.
Understand?
Yeah.
Okay. I will move down.
So if you
Okay.
say any student, then someone could say, I'm just not gonna do anything all year. I'll just show up for the month of summer school and be done with it
Okay.
in
got
2
it.
weeks, right? So,
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Dr. Ojay, my other point would be, is paragraph E, where we use language says it should be specifically understood that it is not the purpose of the summer school program to offering to accelerate. I understand that, I just don't think with a mission that challenges students to excel, we should be specifically saying, but summer school's not your chance to excel. I think it's sufficient just to say that summer school should not duplicate unnecessarily services or programs provided by other agencies or institutions, and just leave it up to the administration that one day policies may change, we may, we can still charge out-of-district students. I just don't think we should close off the point of opportunities for students to do enrichment.
Would you
and
feel
enrichment.
better if that line said it should be specifically understood that it's not the purpose of the summer school remedial program offering to accelerate the students? The point being there is that when these policies were originally put together, summer school was, anything in the summer essentially was essentially remedial. That we're telling students you can't go to say, I'm going to take 2 weeks of summer school calculus and it's going to count for calculus for me. It will offer you, we'll give you the offering, we'll give you the remedial work that you need to do, but you have to have taken and failed the course with a 50 or better first. That's why that line's been in there. Oh, 60, okay, yeah.
Yes, I would, thank you, Dr. J. I would agree with that. I just don't want to forestall the day where we
Right.
have an LMS or we have other opportunities where a student may actually be able to take calculus over a summer, not just 2 weeks jammed in, and it would actually be a robust class that allows a student to accelerate that.
I agree with you wholeheartedly, and just point out that I couldn't find it immediately right now, but there are other places in our policy that do allow for students to do just that. We have about as liberal a policy as I can think of, and I'm sure no one else is more liberal in the state of Rhode Island's public schools in terms of, you know, if someone is interested in, say, a college course online, they can talk to an administrator about, you know, looking that it fits our criteria and have that approved, and they are eligible to do that, so.
Great, thank you, Dr. Rizzo.
Sure.
So then I will make a motion to amend the original motion to insert the word remedial in the first sentence of item 1E between summer and schools. So it would read, it should be specifically understood that it is not the purpose of the summer school remedial program. So I made a motion to amend. I need a second.
Second.
I have a second from Mr. Jones. Any discussion on the amendment? This is now a vote on the amendment. So all those in favor of amending the initial motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The amendment passes unanimously. We now have an amended motion on the table. Any further discussion on the amended motion? All those in favor of the motion as amended? Aye. Any opposed? The amended motion passes unanimously. Okay. Next, we have first read, oh, I missed one.
No, you're deleting.
So,
Oh, the regulation, right.
so, summer school and summer school IHCAR, we have a number of policies in our policy book. Goes back years and years now, where we have this thing where there's a policy and then there's the regulation for the policy. It's overly redundant. Any way that we kind of have procedures about how we do
Internal.
policies, that's internal stuff, it's not really policy. So everything is covered in what you just approved. Number 5 is just something that we don't need anymore, so we're asking to get rid of that.
So, motion to approve item, lost my heading here, E5, which is the deletion of administrative admin regulation IHCAR. Do we have a motion? Motion from Ms. Hoskins, do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Mather, any discussion? All those in favor, aye. And now we have a first read of policy JIC. If I could have a motion to approve, first reading. A motion from Ms. Hoskins,
Second.
second from Ms. Hildebrand. And again, this is a first read, so we'll take it up again at our next meeting, since it's a new policy. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. There's a disposal report in your packet. Any questions on that? Then if not, we have concluded everything on our agenda, and I'd ask for a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion, Ms. Hoskins, second, Mr. Jones. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for pointing out.